Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today by trying a little experiment.
Okay.
It's a mental one, so no need to close your eyes or anything, especially if you're driving. But just for a second, I want you to replay the first hour of your day.
This morning.
Yeah, this morning. Really visualize it. You woke up, the alarm went off, or maybe it didn't. You swung your legs out of bed, you walked to the kitchen.
Right, the coffee decision.
The coffee decision, that's a big one. Light roast, dark roast, maybe tea. You picked out a mug. You chose a shirt, looked in the mirror, you got in your car or on the subway, and you navigated your way to wherever you're going.
Okay, I have that movie playing in my head.
Now, here's the question, and be honest.
Yeah.
In that movie of your morning, who was the director? Who was writing the script?
Well, it feels like a silly question, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, it was me, obviously.
Right. It feels visceral. You felt the steering wheel in your hands. You felt the weight of the decision, the blue shirt versus the gray one. It felt like you were the captain of your own ship.
Absolutely. You're steering your life in a very specific, controlled direction. It all comes from you, from your will.
And that is the default setting for us, right?
Yeah.
We're the protagonists. The world is our stage, and we are the ones pushing the plot forward. It's intuitive.
Yeah.
It's comforting.
It is very comforting.
But here's the hook for today. And I'm going to warn you, this might make you a little bit uncomfortable. What if that feeling, that solid, undeniable sensation of being in the driver's seat, what if it's just a psychological coping mechanism?
What if it's a hallucination?
Hallucination is a strong word.
It is a strong word, but in the context of the sources we're looking at today, it's not entirely inaccurate.
Because we're looking at a stack of research today that suggests something pretty radical. The core premise is this.
Yeah.
We control almost nothing.
Almost nothing.
We influence everything.
And that is the distinction. It sounds like semantics at first, control, influence, what's the difference? But it's not. It's the difference between, like, a clockwork universe and a chaotic one,
Right.
But applied to your daily life.
Power, as our sources say, is just a story we tell ourselves about control.
While influence is the messy, invisible, chaotic reality of how the world actually functions.
And we have a really fascinating stack of sources to help us navigate this. We've got a foundational essay by Joseph Garrity called The Sovereignty of Influence and the Myth of Power.
Which is just as heavy as it sounds.
It really is.
Yeah.
Then we have a spoken word piece, a performance called The Illusion of Control and the Weight of Influence, which brings this very raw, emotional angle to it.
And then the anchor for the science side of things. We're going very deep into the work of social scientist Brian Klaas.
Specifically his book, Fluke, Chance, Chaos, and Why Everything We Do Matters. And we also have a whole series of interviews he gave recently.
Klaas is really the one who provides the mechanics for all this philosophical stuff.
So the mission for this deep dive is to try and strip away those comforting stories. We want to look at the world not as a neat narrative of heroes and villains making choices, but as this chaotic, messy, interconnected web that these sources are describing.
It's about moving from a mindset of, I need to control the outcome, to something more like, I need to understand how I participate in this complex system.
Which sounds much harder.
It's much harder. It requires letting go of the ego. A lot.
A lot. Maybe smashing the ego entirely.
Yeah.
But let's start with the basics, with definitions, because power and influence are words we just throw around interchangeably.
Right. If you say the president has power or the president has influence, most people hear the same thing.
But our sources today argue they're almost opposites.
They're completely different mechanisms. So let's get into that Garrity essay. He has this fantastic metaphor about how we think about power. We treat it like it's a physical object, like it's furniture in a room.
I love this visual, the idea that a country, a company, even a family, it's like a room, and the positions of power, the CEO, the president, the parent, those are the chairs.
Exactly. And our core assumption is that if the room isn't working, if the company's failing or the country's in crisis, the solution is to just move the furniture.
Rearrange the chairs.
We fire the CEO and hire a new one. We vote out the president and elect someone else. And we expect the building, the whole system, to fundamentally change how it operates just because there's a new person in the chair.
But it almost never does. I mean, sure, the headlines change. Maybe the stock price gets a little bump for a week. But the deep structural problems, the culture of the place,
that usually stays exactly the same. And Garrity argues that's because we're obsessed with power, which implies command, direction, ownership.
the idea that outcomes come directly from the will of the person in the chair.
Right. The CEO says, let's increase profits, and that will just travels down the chain of command and magically makes it happen.
which anyone who has ever worked in an office knows is not how it works.
Not at all. And this is where Garrity and the spoken word piece really hammers this home. He argues that power is something we claim after the fact. It's a retrospective story.
Okay, hold on. I have to push back there a little bit. Because if a general orders an airstrike, and then a jet takes off and a bomb is dropped, that seems like a direct cause and effect. That's power. That's not a story.
Is it, though? Or is it a cascade of influence? Think about it. The general gives the order because of intelligence reports he received. That's influence from below.
Okay.
The pilot drops the bomb because of years of training. That's influence from the past, and because they believe in the chain of command, which is systemic influence. If that pilot, for whatever reason, decided not to press the button, the general's power would just evaporate in that instant.
So the general's power is completely dependent on the compliance and participation of thousands of other people and systems.
Precisely. Power is just the label we slap on the final result of all that coordinated influence. It's the gloss, as Garrity calls it. It's the simple story that makes us feel safe.
The spoken word piece had that really blunt line about it.
Oh, it's great. It says, power implies control. Control implies will. Will implies someone knows what the F they're doing.
And, yeah. Let's be honest, anyone who's had a real look behind the curtain at any large organization knows that's just not true.
Nobody really knows what they're doing. We're all just improvising. We're all just leaning on the steering wheel, pretending we're the ones turning the car when the car is actually on a pre-laid track.
So if power is the comforting story, what's actually running the show? What's the track?
That's influence.
And the sources describe influence as messy, continuous. It doesn't care about your job title.
It doesn't care about your beliefs. It just is. The metaphor that replaces the furniture one is airflow.
Right. You can change the chairs all you want. That's power.
Yeah.
But you haven't changed the airflow in the room. That's influence.
Influence is the atmosphere. It's the temperature. It's the pressure. It's the continuous causal participation of everything and everything else. Garrity says systems don't act on the world. They are inside it.
So to go back to the general example, influence is the geopolitical tension, the national mood, the pilot's training, the weather over the target, the mechanical state of the jet.
It's the entire soup that everyone is swimming in. And here is where it gets a little scary. Power is discrete. You either have it or you don't. Influence. Influence is continuous. You can't turn it off.
Which brings us to this idea of the observer fallacy.
Yeah.
This part of the spoken word piece, I have to admit, it really rattled me.
It's a tough one.
Because I think a lot of us, especially with how overwhelming the news is these days, we try to check out. We say, you know what? I'm just going to focus on my gardener. I'm not going to read the news or not going to vote. Both sides are terrible. We think we're stepping out of the arena.
We think we're climbing into the stands to just watch the game.
But the sources argue there are no stands. You are always on the field.
Always. Because even doing nothing is an action. It's an input into the system.
How so?
Well, in a complex system, silence is data. Inaction is a force. If you're in a business meeting and you see a bad decision being made and you choose to say nothing, your silence actually increases the probability of that bad decision happening.
So my silence bends reality just as much as my shouting would have.
Exactly. There's no neutral corner. The spoken word piece says you don't get an observer seat. Resistance creates influence. Compliance creates influence. Apathy creates influence.
We're not authors of the story standing outside and writing it.
We are characters inside the book. And even if a character decides to stand perfectly still on a page, their very presence, their mass, still affects the plot.
That feels heavy. That feels like a huge burden. I can't just chill. My chilling is influencing the fate of the universe.
It is. But that doesn't necessarily have to be a source of anxiety. It just means we have to acknowledge the physics of the situation. And speaking of physics, we need to get into how this influence actually moves through the world.
Right. Because it's not magic. There's a mechanism.
There is a mechanism. And this brings us to Brian Klaas and the science of chaos.
Okay, so we've set up the philosophy. Power is a myth. Influence is the reality. Now let's look at the plumbing. How does my influence actually travel from me to the world? This is where we get into the idea of flukes.
A fluke is basically a low probability event that has these massive cascading consequences. And Klaas's central argument is that our lives and history itself are basically just a series of flukes stitched together that we retroactively call a plan or a destiny.
To illustrate this, we have to tell the story of Ivan and the soccer ball. This story is, I mean, when I read this in the notes, I had to go look it up. It sounds like a movie script that would get rejected for being too unbelievable.
But it's very well documented this actually happened.
So set the scene for us. It's Greece. A man named Ivan is on vacation. He goes for a swim on a beautiful day. But the ocean is deceptive.
He gets caught in a riptide. And anyone who's ever been caught in a rip current knows that terror. You're swimming as hard as you can, but the land is just getting smaller and smaller.
He swept out to sea. His friends can't get to him. He's just gone. He's out there for hours, drifting in the open ocean. We're talking total exhaustion, dehydration, the psychological horror of knowing you're going to drown.
He's starting to lose consciousness. He is, for all intents and purposes, giving up.
And then, in the middle of this vast, empty, blue nothingness, he sees a speck.
Just a little black and white dot bob in on the waves.
It's a ball, a half-inflated child's soccer ball.
The only thing in sight for miles.
He manages to find one last burst of energy, swims to it, and grabs it. It's not a life raft, obviously, but it's just buoyant enough. He clings to this soccer ball, and it keeps his head above water.
And it saves his life. A rescue boat finds him hours later, still holding onto this ball.
Now, if the story just ended there, it would be an incredible survival story, a miracle. But it's the second half of the story that makes it a lesson in influence.
This is where it gets truly mind-bending.
So Ivan is saved. The story makes the local news in Greece. Man saved by miraculous soccer ball. And a woman in a completely different part of Greece sees this report on TV. She sees the ball they're holding up, and she freezes.
She knows that ball.
It turns out, 10 days earlier, her 2 young sons were playing soccer on a beach. But this beach was nowhere near where Ivan was swimming. It was 80 miles away.
80 miles. Let that sink in.
The kids were just being kids. They kicked the ball too hard. It went over a cliff, fell into the water, and the current just took it. The kids were crying, "We lost our ball." And the mom probably said what any parent would say, "Well, that's gone forever."
Think about that causal chain for a second. 2 little kids, bored on a Tuesday afternoon, kick a piece of plastic and leather, they make a mistake, they lose their toy.
And that mistake travels 80 miles over 10 days, navigating currents and winds to arrive at the exact specific longitude and latitude of a dying man's hand.
At the exact second he was about to go under for the last time,
If those kids had kicked that ball 5 minutes later,
Ivan dies.
if the wind had blown north instead of south on day 3,
Ivan dies.
if the mom had bought them a video game that day instead of a soccer ball,
Ivan dies. It is terrifyingly fragile.
it is. It's terrifying. But it's also the perfect definition of influence versus power. Those children had 0 power to save Ivan. If you had gone to them and said, "There is a man drowning 80 miles away, I command you to save him," they couldn't possibly have done it.
The most powerful admiral in the Greek Navy couldn't have orchestrated that rescue with that kind of timing. It's impossible.
But their influence.
Their influence was absolute. It was total. The spoken word piece has a line that sums it up perfectly. You kick a ball because you're bored. A week later, a guy doesn't die. No destiny, just interaction.
No destiny, just interaction.
Yeah.
That's the bumper sticker for this whole deep dive. But this brings up a really uncomfortable point. We love stories like Ivan's because it's a happy ending. It feels miraculous, divinely inspired.
But Brian Klaas is quick to point out that this mechanism, this physics of chaos, it works both ways. It creates miracles, but it also creates absolute nightmares.
And he uses his own family's origin story to illustrate this. And he gives a warning here. This really challenges the everything happens for a reason crowd.
It really does. This is a tough one.
Yeah, this is heavy. So we go back to 1905, rural Wisconsin. Brian Klaas's great-grandfather is living there with his wife and their 4 young children.
And it's an unbelievably tragic story. His great-grandmother was suffering from what we would now clearly diagnose as severe postpartum psychosis. But in 1905, there was no diagnosis. There was no help, no name for what she was going through. And one day, under the weight of this illness, she snapped. She killed all 4 of their children. And then she killed herself. It's unimaginable. The worst possible thing that can happen to a person, to a family. The husband, Klaas's great-grandfather, comes home from work to find this scene. His entire world, his entire lineage, annihilated in a single afternoon.
He survives. He keeps living.
He survives the grief, and eventually, years later, he remarries. He has new children with his new wife.
And the new family line continues. Those children have children, and one of those grandchildren is Brian Klaas.
Right. So Klaas is sitting there writing this book about chance and chaos, and he has this profound realization. I only exist because my great-grandfather's first family was brutally murdered. That is the brutal, unforgiving math of contingency. If that horrific tragedy doesn't happen, his great-grandfather never remarries that second woman. That lineage never starts. Brian Klaas is never born. We are not sitting here having this conversation about his book.
So if you're someone who says everything happens for a reason, you are logically forced to say that those 4 children had to die so that Brian Klaas could exist.
Which is morally grotesque. It's an awful thing to believe. And that's why Klaas pushes back so hard against what he calls teleology, this idea that there's a purpose or a design to everything. He says we just have to accept that sometimes terrible things just happen. They are flukes, they are sparks in dry grass.
But those sparks, those tragedies, are the causal foundation of our entire existence.
Exactly. It's not a neat and tidy story. A Hollywood screenwriter would never write it because it's too cruel, too random. But that's reality.
This moves us into the 2 big scientific concepts that Klaas uses to explain how history moves: contingency and convergence. I want to spend some time here because I think really getting these terms changes how you see everything.
It's absolutely foundational. This is basically evolutionary biology applied to all of human history.
Let's start with contingency. This is the classic butterfly effect idea, right? A butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil.
And sets off a tornado in Texas.
Yes. Contingency is the theory that small, seemingly insignificant changes in the initial conditions can lead to wildly different outcomes down the line. It means the path of history is incredibly fragile.
And the ultimate example of this is the dinosaurs.
The asteroid. 66 million years ago, we all know the basic story. Big rock from space hits Earth, dinosaurs die, mammals take over, humans eventually invent podcasts.
A noble outcome.
A noble outcome. But the nuance is in the details that Klaas highlights. The asteroid didn't just hit Earth. It hit a very specific spot, the shallow waters of the Yucatan Peninsula. And that spot happened to be incredibly rich in sulfur.
Okay, and that matters. Why?
Because the impact vaporized all that sulfur, sent it rocketing into the atmosphere, which created a globe-spanning cloud that blocked out the sun. That's what created the global winter that killed the dinosaurs, the cold and the dark. Right, so it wasn't the impact itself, it was the dust cloud.
It was the dust cloud. But here's the contingent part. If that asteroid had arrived just a few seconds later...
Seconds, not minutes or hours.
Literally seconds. The Earth rotates at about 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. If the asteroid arrives a few seconds later, the planet has turned just enough that it misses the Yucatan.
And it hits where?
It hits the deep Pacific Ocean. It would have been a huge splash, massive tsunamis, a very bad day for any sea life in the area. But no sulfur cloud, no global winter. The dinosaurs survive.
And if the dinosaurs survive, mammals stay as these little rat-like creatures hiding in burrows. We never evolve.
We never evolve. So our entire existence, every book ever written, and every piece of music, every conversation is contingent on a matter of seconds 66 million years ago. That is contingency. One tiny variable shifts, and the entire future is rewritten.
Okay, so that's the argument for everything is random and fragile. But then there's this opposing force. Convergence?
Right. Convergence is the idea that certain outcomes are almost inevitable because they represent the most efficient solution to a given problem. So history, or evolution, will tend to converge on the same answer, even if it starts from different places.
The classic example for this is the eye.
The eye. Humans and octopuses are very, very distant relatives. We split on the evolutionary tree about 600 million years ago. We took completely different paths to get where we are.
Right, we have bones, they don't. We live on land, they live in the sea. Very different.
Very different. But if you dissect an octopus eye and a human eye and put them side by side, they're structurally almost identical. They both have a lens, an iris, a retina.
How is that possible? Did we get the blueprint from the same ancestor 600 million years ago?
No. Physics dictates the blueprint. If you want to process light on a planet with this kind of atmosphere and this kind of sun, a camera-style eye is simply the most efficient design. So evolution, through trial and error, stumbled upon that same solution at least twice, completely independently. That is convergence.
So if we apply this to human history, contingency says if you go back in time and kill baby Hitler, World War II never happens.
Right. The war was contingent on that one person.
But convergence would say, if you kill baby Hitler, it doesn't matter. Germany was still economically devastated, anti-Semitism was still rampant, the Treaty of Versailles was still seen as unjust, the conditions are ripe, someone else would have risen up and started a similar war anyway.
Precisely. The outcome was convergent. And the huge debate among historians and scientists is, which force is stronger? Are we living in a world of fragile flukes, a world of contingency, or are we living in a world of broad, inevitable trends, a world of convergence?
And Klaas seems to lean pretty heavily toward contingency being much more powerful than we like to admit. He uses this snooze button thought experiment to bring it home.
The sliding doors moment.
Yeah, so it's Tuesday morning.
Right.
I wake up, I hit the snooze button for 5 minutes. That's it, just a 5-minute delay. Does that actually change my life?
Our intuition says no. Convergence says no. You'll still get up, you'll still go to work, you'll still be you. The outcome is the same.
But Klaas argues for contingency. He says, because we are physical beings moving through a physical world, that 5-minute shift changes the position of every single car on the highway relative to you. It changes who you happen to walk past in the lobby of your building. It's all just noise.
It's the noise. That 5-minute delay might mean you miss a fatal car accident by 10 seconds. Or
Yeah.
it might mean you are in that fatal car accident. It might mean you don't bump into the person in the coffee line who would have become your spouse.
But wait a minute, if I start thinking like that, I'm going to have a panic attack every single morning. Oh my God, should I drink the coffee? If I drink the coffee, I'll be 3 minutes later, I might die on the freeway. It's completely paralyzing.
It is paralyzing if your goal is to control it. But Klaas's point isn't that you should try to game the system and predict the chaos. You can't. His point is that we should recognize the power of these invisible pivots.
What's an invisible pivot?
It's the small, random stuff. We build our life stories around the big, visible choices. I chose to go to Harvard. I chose to marry Sarah. We ignore the fact that the only reason you even applied to Harvard was a random conversation with a substitute teacher. We ignore that you only met Sarah because you both happened to reach for the same muffin at a coffee shop you weren't even supposed to be at that day.
We ignore the chaos that creates the opportunities for our choices to even exist.
Exactly. We see the choice, but we're blind to the fluke that made the choice possible.
Speaking of invisible pivots that shaped history, we have to talk about the Kyoto fluke.
I consider myself a bit of a history nerd, and I had never heard this story. It completely blew my mind about the atomic bomb.
This might be the single most consequential vacation in all of human history.
So set the scene. It's 1945. The Manhattan Project has succeeded. The U.S. has the bomb, and they are making a list of targets in Japan. And the generals have a clear number one choice.
Kyoto.
Why Kyoto? From a cold military logic, it made perfect sense. Kyoto was the intellectual and cultural capital of Japan. It had significant industry. The generals wanted to deliver a psychological blow that would break the Japanese spirit. Destroying Kyoto, they believed, would do that. It was at the very top of the list.
But then one man, Henry Stimson, steps in. He's the Secretary of War at the time. He goes directly to President Truman and says, "You cannot bomb Kyoto. Take it off the list."
And the generals are furious. This is their prime target. They keep putting it back on the list, and Stimson just keeps taking it off over and over.
Why? What was his reasoning? Did he have some secret intelligence?
No, it's because in 1926, 19 years earlier, Henry Stimson and his wife took a vacation to Kyoto.
A vacation.
Just a holiday. They had their honeymoon there. He walked through the ancient temples. He saw the cherry blossoms. He stayed at the famous Miyako Hotel. He fell in love with the city and its culture. He called it his pet city.
So because one powerful American tourist had a pleasant experience 2 decades prior, he saves an entire city from nuclear annihilation.
He single-handedly rerouted history based on a fond memory. The military, frustrated, moved down the list to the secondary target, Hiroshima. And then, for the second bomb, the primary target was the city of Kokura.
But Kokura wasn't the city that was bombed.
No. On the morning of August 9th, 1945, the bomber flew over Kokura. But a weather system had moved in overnight. There were just clouds. Maybe it was smoke from a nearby firebombing raid the night before, but the pilot couldn't get a clear visual of the target.
So he couldn't drop the bomb.
They couldn't. They flew over the city 3 times trying to find a break in the clouds. They failed. They were running low on fuel, so they were forced to divert to the backup target, Nagasaki. So think about that. If you are a person living in Kokura in 1945, you survive because of a passing cloud. If you live in Kyoto, you survive because a man had a nice honeymoon there in the 1920s. And if you live in Nagasaki, you die because of those same 2 random variables.
That is the ultimate definition of lack of control. There's no merit involved. The people of Kyoto weren't better or smarter or more deserving.
They were just lucky that Henry Stimson was a tourist. It creates a very humble view of history. We like to think it's all about great men making rational, strategic decisions, but so often it's shaped by vacations and clouds and moods and traffic jams.
This brings us to the physics of society.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about how these very small things, clouds, vacations, soccer balls, can cause these massive, disproportionate events. And this really challenges the old view of the universe.
The old clockwork universe idea.
Right, what was that?
Well, that was the dream that came from Isaac Newton. Newton gave us these beautiful, predictable laws of motion. If you kick a ball with a certain force at a certain angle, you can calculate exactly where it will land. The universe seemed predictable, like a giant, intricate clock.
And this gave rise to the thought experiment of Laplace's demon.
Right. Pierre-Simon Laplace, a French mathematician, proposed that if a superintelligence, a demon, knew the exact position and momentum of every single atom in the universe at one specific moment,
The ultimate data set.
the ultimate data set. He argued that this demon could use the laws of physics to perfectly predict the entire future of everything. It could replay the past and pre-play the future.
Total determinism.
Yeah.
If you have enough data, you know what's coming.
But we know now that the demon is blind. It fails for two fundamental reasons. First, you have quantum mechanics. Werner Heisenberg proved with his uncertainty principle that you literally cannot know both the precise position and the precise momentum of a particle at the same time.
The very act of measuring one changes the other.
Exactly. So the demon can never have the perfect initial data to begin with. The data is inherently fuzzy at the very bottom level of reality.
And the second reason it fails
Is chaos theory. This is where the sandpile model comes in. And this is absolutely critical for understanding our modern interconnected world.
Okay, walk us through the sandpile model. It's a very simple visual.
It is. Imagine you're sitting at a table and you are dropping single grains of sand one by one onto the same spot. A little pile starts to form. At first it's flat and stable. The grains you add just sit there.
But as the pile gets higher, the sides get steeper.
Right. Gravity starts to fight against the friction holding the grains together. The pile is building up internal tension. Eventually, it reaches a critical state, what physicists call self-organized criticality. The system is now balanced on a knife's edge.
Every grain is just barely holding on.
Precisely. And then you drop one more grain of sand, and that single grain might do nothing. It might just sit on top, or it might cause a tiny slide of maybe 10 other grains, or it might trigger a massive catastrophic avalanche that collapses the entire side of the pile.
And here's the kicker. The grain you dropped is exactly the same size as all the others. The input is always the same, but the output varies wildly from nothing to total collapse.
That's the key takeaway. In a critical system, the size of the cause bears no relationship to the size of the effect. And here's the scary part that Klaas emphasizes. Our modern society is not a predictable clock. It is a sand pile.
And we have spent the last 50 years building it to be a very, very steep sand pile.
We have relentlessly optimized for efficiency. We have just-in-time manufacturing and supply chains. We have the internet connecting every bank to every other bank in real time. We have systematically removed all the friction from the system.
And when you remove friction in a sand pile, you make the sides steeper. You can build it higher and faster, but it becomes exponentially more unstable.
The Suez Canal blockage is the perfect example of this. The container ship, the Ever Given.
A modern marvel of efficiency. A ship the size of a skyscraper,
Yep.
carrying goods for a dozen countries.
A masterpiece of optimization. But in 2021, a single gust of wind, just a puff of air, a tiny grain of sand, caught the side of the ship like a sail. It twisted it just a few degrees, and it got stuck in the mud.
And because our global system is so hyper-optimized with no slack, that one stuck boat didn't just annoy a few sailors.
It cost the global economy an estimated $54 billion. It shut down factories in Europe because they couldn't get parts. It delayed Christmas presents in America. It was a global avalanche caused by a single grain of sand.
Klaas makes this brilliant distinction between local stability and global instability. I found this so helpful for understanding why the world feels so strange right now.
It's the central paradox of modernity. Think about a hunter-gatherer living 10,000 years ago. Their daily life was filled with local instability.
Right? They might not find food today. A saber-toothed tiger might eat them. A simple infection could kill them at age 20. Their day-to-day life was incredibly risky.
But the world itself, the world was globally stable. The human population didn't change much generation to generation. The climate was relatively steady. And what happened on the continent in North America had zero impact on what was happening in Europe. The systems were completely disconnected.
And we have completely flipped that script.
We have. Our lives now have incredible local stability. You wake up, you have climate control, you have antibiotics, you can have a pizza delivered to your door in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Your daily survival is, for most of us in the developed world, almost guaranteed.
But we've created massive global instability.
Because every part of the system is now connected to every other part. A virus evolves in a wet market in Wuhan, a tiny local biological accident. Within months, the entire planet is in lockdown. 8 billion lives are fundamentally altered.
Or a mid-sized bank in Silicon Valley makes some bad bets on government bonds.
And suddenly, tech startups in London and Berlin can't make their payroll. We are safer in our individual houses, but the global house we all live in is more fragile than ever.
We traded personal risk for systemic risk. We got rid of the tigers, but we built the sandpile so high that one sneeze can bring it all down.
These events, these black swans, 9/11, the 2008 financial crisis, COVID, we treat them as shocking outliers. But Klaas argues they aren't outliers. They are the inevitable products of the hyper-efficient critical systems we've built. The avalanches are a feature, not a bug.
So if this is the reality, if we're all just living on a giant, unstable sand pile and flukes rule our lives, why do we have such a hard time seeing it? Why does my brain still desperately want to believe that I'm the captain of the ship?
Because your brain didn't evolve for chaos theory. It evolved for the savannah, where simple cause and effect was a good survival guide. Klaas identifies 3 specific cognitive biases that blind us to this reality.
Okay, let's break them down. The first one is narrative bias.
We are storytelling animals. We are hardwired to need the world to make sense. We need a beginning, a middle, and an end. We need a clear cause and a clear effect.
The stock market crashed because the president's policies were bad. That's a simple, satisfying story.
It is. The stock market crashed because a million different high-frequency trading algorithms interacted in a complex, unpredictable way that no single human understands. That is not a satisfying story. It's boring. It doesn't give us a villain we can blame or a hero we can praise.
We crave the why, and if we can't find a real why, we'll just invent one.
Which leads directly to the second bias, magnitude bias. It's the deep-seated, intuitive belief that big events must have big causes. If a million people die in a war, our brain tells us the cause must be something equally huge, a clash of civilizations, a massive ideological struggle.
We don't want to accept that World War I, which killed 20 million people, was set in motion because an Archduke's driver made a wrong turn down a street in Sarajevo.
Exactly. Our brains just reject that small cause, big effect reality. Look at the death of Princess Diana, which the sources bring up.
Right. The official story is, well, it was a drunk driver, a poorly designed tunnel, a lack of seatbelts. It's a tragic but ultimately banal car accident.
But Diana was an icon. Her death was a big event. So
Yeah.
a small cause, like a drunk driver, just feels wrong. It creates this cognitive dissonance. So what do people do?
They invent conspiracies. It had to be the royal family. It was MI6. It was an assassination. Because a massive secret plot feels big enough to explain the death of a princess.
It satisfies our magnitude bias. And the Arab Spring is the reverse example. A massive event regimes toppled across the North Africa, started by one Tunisian street vendor setting himself on fire. A tiny spark that burned down a forest.
And the third bias is teleological bias.
Which is just a fancy way of saying the belief that everything happens for a reason, that there is a purpose, a design, a destiny.
And this connects directly to the conspiracy theory epidemic we're living through.
It absolutely does. Think about the job of a fact-checker versus the job of a conspiracy theorist. A fact-checker looks at a strange event, and most of the time, their conclusion is, honestly, it's just a coincidence. It's random noise.
Which is boring. Nothing to see here.
Right. But the conspiracy theorist looks at the same event and says, no, look at the shadows, look at the timing. It's all connected. There is a secret plot being run by a hidden cabal.
That's a thriller movie.
It's a thriller movie. It engages our pattern-matching brain. It gives us a narrative. It releases dopamine. The exciting thriller beats the boring documentary in the human brain almost every time.
There's a story in the sources that I think is the perfect antidote to this kind of thinking. It's the story of Joseph Lott and the Monet tie.
This is such a powerful counter-narrative to everything happens for a reason.
So this is 9/11. Joseph Lott worked in the World Trade Center. On the morning of September 11th, he has a breakfast meeting with a colleague named Elaine. And he shows up for the meeting wearing a green shirt.
And Elaine has a gift for him. It's a tie with a Monet painting on it, lots of blues and purples. And Elaine, who clearly had a good eye for fashion, looks at him and says something like, Joseph, that is a beautiful tie, but it clashes horribly with that green shirt.
So the fashion police inadvertently saved his life.
Basically, Joseph was a little embarrassed. He said, you know what, you're right. I have a white shirt back in my hotel room. Let me run up, change, and I'll meet you at the conference. And the conference was at Windows on the World, at the very top of the North Tower.
So he leaves the building.
He leaves, he goes to his hotel room, he takes out his ironing board and starts ironing his white shirt. And while he is ironing, he looks out his hotel window and sees the first plane hit the exact tower where he was supposed to be.
And Elaine was still there. She died.
She died. Joseph lived. Now, here is the brutal problem with teleological bias. If you go to Joseph's lot and you say, everything happens for a reason, what are you actually saying to him?
You're implying that the universe conspired to save him and that Elaine's death was a necessary part of that plan, or that the tie was some kind of divine instrument.
It's unbelievably cruel, and survivors of these kinds of flukes, they often despise that narrative because it implies that the people who died were meant to die. Sometimes there is no grand reason. Sometimes a tie just clashes with a shirt. That is the terrifying, beautiful, random messiness of influence.
If we accept this, that luck and flukes and randomness play this enormous role, it really challenges our most cherished ideas about success and merit, doesn't it? Our whole culture worships the self-made person, the billionaire genius.
The delusion of individualism. This is a big one. We look at the outcome, extreme wealth, and we work backwards to infer the cause, extreme genius.
But the data tells a very different story.
There was a fascinating study done by a team of physicists where they modeled the distribution of talent versus the distribution of luck in a society. We know from decades of research that human talent, whether it's intelligence or artistic ability or athletic skill, is distributed on a bell curve.
Right. Most people are average. A few are below average. A few are above average. Nobody is a billion times smarter than the average person. Even Einstein wasn't a billion times smarter than a regular physicist. Maybe, 1.5 times smarter.
Exactly. But wealth is not distributed on a bell curve. It follows a long tail or a power law distribution. You have people who are literally millions or billions of times wealthier than the average person. The disparity in wealth is orders of magnitude larger than the disparity in talent.
So the math just doesn't add up. You can't explain that gap with talent alone.
You can't. The simulation showed that the richest people in the system were almost never the most talented. The most talented people were usually up there doing well, but the absolute wealthiest were typically people with above average talent.
So you have to be competent. You can't be an idiot.
You have to be competent enough to stay in the game. But the deciding factor, the thing that catapulted them into the stratosphere, was extraordinary luck. Lightning striking 2 or 3 times in their favor.
Klaas Kreinsman brings up Elon Musk here. And look, obviously Musk is a very smart guy. He's a talented engineer. But is he the smartest human on Earth?
The market values him as if he is. But Klaas points out that we infer this universal genius because of his wealth. We say, well, he succeeded at PayPal and Tesla and SpaceX, so he must know how to fix social media. But when he bought Twitter, he very quickly destroyed tens of billions of dollars in value. The Midas touch didn't transfer.
It suggests his early success was a combination of talent and being in the right place at the right time with the right idea, not some kind of universal superpower of control.
And there's another point in the sources about greed acting as a filter for who even becomes a billionaire.
What do you mean by that?
It's a sociological observation. To become a billionaire, you have to want $3 billion when you already have $2 billion. Most rational, psychologically healthy people would just stop at some point. They'd say, I have enough money for 1,000 lifetimes, I'm going to cure malaria, or I'm just going to go sit on a beach.
So the very class of billionaires is self-selected for a kind of obsessive, insatiable drive for accumulation.
Exactly. It's not just a filter for who is the smartest. It's also a filter for who can never, ever have enough.
I want to go to the deepest, most philosophical part of the pool now, before we wrap up. And that is the free will debate. Because if everything is just a chain of cause and effect, if my decision to drink coffee this morning was just determined by atoms firing in my brain, do I have any real choice at all?
And Klaas puts his cards on the table. He calls himself a hard determinist. It stems from a physicalist worldview. The argument is elegantly simple and also terrifying. It goes like this. The mind is the product of the brain. The brain is physical matter. And matter obeys the laws of physics.
And the laws of physics are just cause and effect, going all the way back.
All the way back. So every thought you have is the result of a particular chemical and electrical state in your brain. That state was caused by the state that came 1 millisecond before it, and that one was caused by the one before that. You can trace that unbroken chain of causation all the way back to the Big Bang.
But that feels so wrong. I feel like I could have chosen not to say that last sentence. I feel the choice happening.
But did you? Or did the neurochemistry corresponding to wanting to prove a point about free will fire in your brain, and that caused you to say it? The philosopher Sam Harris uses this great puppet analogy. He says that arguing for free will is like saying a puppet is free as long as it loves its strings.
Oof, that is a dark image.
Sure.
It is. The argument is that we are conscious of our choices. We feel the process of choosing. But we are not conscious of the causes of those choices. Why do you prefer vanilla ice cream over chocolate? You didn't choose to prefer it, you just do. Your will, your preference is determined by your biology, your upbringing, your environment.
So we're just puppets of influence playing out a script that was written at the beginning of time.
In a strict physical sense, yes, but, and this is a really big but, remember the airflow, remember the tapestry. Just because you aren't the solitary author of your life doesn't mean you aren't participating. You are a unique, unrepeatable node in the network. Your string pulls on all the other strings. Your influence is real, even if your control is an illusion.
This brings us to the conclusion, and I want to make sure we don't just leave everyone in a puddle of existential dread, because the sources argue that this lack of control is actually liberating.
It's deeply liberating if you can get your head around it. Think about the incredible burden of believing in total control. If you believe you are the captain of your fate, then every single failure is entirely your fault.
Right. If you aren't rich, it's because you didn't work hard enough. If you get sick, it's because you didn't eat the right kale salad.
The entire self-help industry is built on that toxic premise. Manifest your destiny. It completely ignores the role of flukes, of luck, of the system you're embedded in.
So recognizing the role of chaos and influence allows us to be kinder to ourselves.
Yes. We can take a little less credit for our successes, which keeps us humble. But we can also take a lot less blame for our failures. We can finally say, you know what, I did my best, but the wave was just too big.
And there's this beautiful final image of the tapestry.
We aren't individual threads just hanging in a void. We are woven into this vast, intricate tapestry of cause and effect. Klaas mentions the origin of the mitochondria. 2 billion years ago, one simple bacterium swallowed another one. It was a complete accident. But instead of digesting it, they formed a symbiotic relationship.
And that became the powerhouse of the complex cell.
That one fluke, that one accident created all complex life on Earth. Without that microbial mistake 2 billion years ago, we don't exist. We are here because of that. We're here because of the asteroid missed by seconds. We're here because of Henry Stimson's honeymoon.
So if you pull on any one of those threads, the entire picture of the present changes.
You matter profoundly, not because you are in charge, but because you are connected.
So what is the practical takeaway here? If we can't control the future, if we can't predict the black swans and the sandpile avalanches, how are we supposed to live our lives?
We need to make a fundamental shift in our strategy. We need to shift from optimization to resilience.
Okay, explain what that means.
Stop trying to build a sandpile as high and as steep as possible. Stop trying to optimize every single second of your day for maximum productivity. That creates a brittle, fragile life. If your schedule is packed to the second and you get delayed by 5 minutes, your entire day collapses. That's fragility.
So build slack into the system.
Yes. Slack, redundancy. A resilient system handles flukes much better than an efficient one does. If you have extra savings, losing your job isn't a death sentence. If you have deep friendships and community, a personal tragedy is survivable. We need to design our lives and our societies to absorb the shock of the unexpected, rather than pretending the unexpected will never happen.
I love that. It's about being ready for the wave, not trying to command the tide to stop.
Precisely. And it's about distinguishing between the questions you must answer, like what are my core values, or how will I treat people today, and the questions you can't answer, like what will the GDP of Malawi be in 2035? We waste so much energy trying to predict the unpredictable.
Before we sign off, I just want to leave our listener with one final thought to chew on today. I want you to think about the snooze button moments in your own past. The invisible bullets you dodged, the random left turn you took that led you to the coffee shop where you met your partner, the substitute teacher who happened to be in a good mood the day they graded your final essay.
It's incredibly humbling when you really think about it.
You are sitting here right now in this moment listening to this because of a million flukes that you never even saw. in an unbroken chain of cosmic accidents.
And if we control nothing but influence everything, then your only real responsibility is how you participate in that chaos. You can't control the outcome, but the quality of your influence, your kindness, your attention, your integrity, your airflow, that is the only thing that is truly completely yours.
Dive deep, stay curious, and maybe don't worry so much about the plan. Thanks for listening.